Okay, well, this summer we are studying selections from the book of Proverbs. And we're using this idea of what are called life hacks to help us think about the practical teaching and guidance that the book of Proverbs gives us. Proverbs is a book that wants to teach us wisdom. And in Proverbs, wisdom essentially means being good at life, especially in relationships and right choices. So life hacks. Well, here's a tasty one. Here Solomon is thinking about what to do with his jar of Nutella when it's almost gone. Well, here's a great suggestion. You fill it with vanilla ice cream and you eat all of it. That sounds fine, doesn't it? Actually, that's such a great idea. You could actually do that with peanut butter. That would be good. Maybe jelly. Mayonnaise. You're almost done with your jar of mayonnaise. Fill that thing up with ice cream. Probably want chocolate ice cream in that case. Well, maybe not mayonnaise. Well, after his snack, Solomon wants to go to the beach, but he's concerned because he's a man of wealth, and he's afraid that someone is going to steal his cash. So look here. Here he's thinking about a good way to hide his cash at the beach. Look at this. You take an old chapstick tube, haul it out, and you can roll up your cash in there. Same principle. Solomon is also thinking about, well, what about the keys to my new 2025 Chevy Corvette? Well, you could do the same thing with a bottle of sunscreen. Empty it out, screw off the lid, and you can, in a secret way, keep your things hidden in there. That's pretty good. That's very helpful. But it brings up the topic of finances. And here is an area that the book of Proverbs zeroes in on, is how does the wise person handle finances? And frankly, there's perhaps few more practical topics that the book of Proverbs deals with than this issue of finances. Financial concerns is surely one of the top three, if not the number one reason couples have fights or arguments. The American Heart Association says 82% of adults feel stressed about money. Anyone relate? Okay. Financial tensions, financial disagreements, how to handle money, spending, saving, all of this swirling together is a huge part of life. Years ago, Douglas Adams, British author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, wrote this about the Earth after it was destroyed. He said, this planet has, or rather had a problem, which was this. Most of the people living on it were unhappy for pretty much most of the time. Many solutions were suggested for this problem, but most of these were largely concerned with the movement of small green pieces of paper, which was odd because on the whole, it wasn't the small green pieces of paper that were unhappy. Money. These small green pieces of paper, they can cause us turmoil, they can cause us stress, and yet other people will seek after money like it's a god that's going to fix all of their problems. And the reality is, those small green pieces of paper and their movement, that can't fix all of your problems. But we do have to figure out how to manage these things. So learn to manage your job and your career well, and you will be good at that part of life. Learn to manage your finances well and to make wise decisions, and you will be good at that part of life. All right, so today we're going to look at an odd but helpful passage in the book of Proverbs that intros us and brings us into this whole discussion. And here in this passage, we will see three key directions. The verse we'll look at today is Proverbs 27, 23 to 27. So pull out an outline if you got one of our bulletins when you came in. There's a paper version of our outline in there. Otherwise, you can grab one from the tables in the back, or you can find a digital version of this outline in our church mobile app, which is called Grace Bible Chapel. You can download that. So let's start here. Here's the first key direction of this passage. Attentiveness, a key to being good at life. So here's verse 23 of chapter 27 of Proverbs. It says, be sure you know the condition of your flocks. Give careful attention to your herds. So what we're going to see is this verse is set in the ancient world of farming or animal husbandry. Okay? So here we're envisioning an ancient farmer or shepherd in ancient Israel. And we'll see later down in the verses, the herds and flocks he's thinking about are sheep and goats. So, would you guys rather have sheep or goats? If you're on team sheep, raise your hand. Okay. Team goat? Okay, about an even split. So interestingly and amusingly, we might have some sheep or goats in our church's future because we are kicking around the idea and probably going down the path of bringing in some goats and staking them along our disc golf course to help them eat the poison ivy that grows in the woods, because apparently they will happily munch on poison ivy. So you might see some goats around here. Now, in this verse, notice what it says. Be sure you know the condition of your flocks. Give careful attention to your herds. So in that setting, these sheep and goats would represent the wealth of that individual. Okay, so in that setting, to a great degree, if you were a pastoralist like that, your wealth was stored in these sheep or goats. And this is still true in much of the world. So back in August, my wife and son Christopher went to Africa and Uganda, and they were working with a group of people that this is what they do. They raise cattle. And so the number of cows you had was the marker of wealth. Okay, this was established your social pecking order. So one guy in a field, as Kaylani was walking by, offered to marry her, actually. She told him she was already married. He said that wasn't a problem. That was okay. I'd be curious to know how many cows the price would have been, because this is involved in marriage. It's like, okay, how many cows? And they were discussing how the price of how many cows you had to own to be able to get married has fluctuated over the years, inflation or deflation, you know? So when we look at this discussion here of flocks and herds, understand this is the storage of wealth for this individual. But notice that was also for them what we would call their career or their business, because their store of wealth was not simply how many sheep or goats they had, but this was also what generated more wealth, right? So when we look at this passage, when it tells us to know the condition of your flocks, give careful attention to your herds, for us, this is going to involve both our finances, okay, our resources we have, but this would also include paying attention to whatever is our career or our source of income or our livelihood. So notice this is saying we better know the condition of our flocks. If your wealth is determined by how many sheep you have, and if your future income and business is determined by how many sheep you have, you better know those flocks, right? You better know how many sheep you have. You better know the health of them. You better know, okay, who's mating with who out there. You better know which ewes are pregnant. How many babies are there? What do we have to do to protect them? You got to be paying attention to, okay, are they getting enough food? Do we need to move them on to the next plot of grass? You need to be on guard against predators. So if your finances and your income is determined by this group of sheep, Proverbs is saying, look, you better give careful attention to these animals, because in this practical way, much of your future is bound up with them. So I watched a video this week from a Christian financial teacher named Dave Ramsey. He had a little line in there which caught my attention. He said, people don't usually win by accident. If you think about that, that's probably pretty true. And by winning, I mean sort of being successful in any significant endeavor. Usually you don't win by accident. Now, sometimes, sure. So back in April, we were in the Mall of America with my parents celebrating my daughter's birthday, and we went into the food court, and we're sitting there waiting for some kids to come out of the bathroom, and my dad looks down, and there by his shoe is a $100 bill. Wow, that's nice. That's just a little win out of nowhere. Okay, but most of the time, that is not the norm. Okay, most of the time, if you look at anybody who's very successful in any endeavor or pursuit, that probably did not happen by accident. Typically, what is required to win and to be successful in any great endeavor, well, it would take a certain level of attentiveness. The wisdom teacher here is saying, look, you want to be successful as a shepherd, you need to be attentive to your business. You need to be attentive to your flock. If you are in the logging business, if you are a logger out in the woods, what's going to happen if you are not attentive to your work? You're probably not going to be a logger very long, because you'll be dead, right? What happens if you are a surgeon and you are not attentive to your business of surgery? Well, that's not good for us, right? To succeed in these fields requires close attention. Well, this is true for work, business, career, but it's also true in regard to finances. It is unlikely that we will be successful financially if we are haphazard and paying no attention to what's going on. We need to know the condition of our flocks. We need to be giving careful attention to the finances in our life. If we're not attentive, we spend all of our money, well, we're in trouble. If we're not attentive and we take on all sorts of debt, we're in trouble. If we're not attentive and we just let our cash sit in an ordinary savings account, well, we're in trouble because it's not going to keep up with inflation. That money will be worth less and less. So to succeed in this regard takes some attentiveness. Here's some other verses along these lines. I gave you a bunch on your outline, but here's just a couple. Look on the screen. This is 27:12. The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. So if you're paying attention to your flocks and your sheep, you see trouble. Well, I'm not having enough baby sheep born. Well, I'm sure that'll be fine. Well, eventually, a few generations, you're in big trouble. 21:20. The wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down. If we're not attentive to our spending habits and how that compares with the inflow of our finances, we can end up in big trouble. Okay, so now we're going to see why this attentiveness is important. The next verse is going to show us why we are supposed to pay close attention to our flock. So here's the second key direction for us. Part 2, money is a temporary, relative good. Let's look at verse 24. Here's his explanation. For riches do not endure forever, and a crown is not secure for all generations. So he says, pay attention to your flocks and herds. Why? Because riches are not forever. So this tells us a few things. The first thing it tells us that all things being equal, money and wealth, well, these are actually good things. Notice that's the logic of the book of Proverbs. That's the logic of this verse in Proverbs. He says, look, you need to pay attention to your herds. Why? Because riches aren't forever. By implication, this wealth is something that should be monitored, should be protected, and should be preserved. So Proverbs will hold money and wealth, all things being equal, out to us as something that is good and helpful. So having money does have real benefits over poverty. The practical business of life. Well, yes, of course. This is how Proverbs will portray it. Again, I gave you lots of verses here. Look at 14:20. The poor are shunned even by their neighbors, but the rich have many friends. So there's an observation of the social setting of ancient Israel. The wisdom teachers looked around, they said, look what poverty does. It brings social isolation. But look, if you have wealth, now you have social connections. Now people want to be your friend. So notice in that verse, there's nothing negative said about having money, wealth, or resources, right? In that verse, that's shown as, look, okay, that's better than being poor. Because this verse shows us the social isolation that is possible from poverty. Okay, so Proverbs treats money and wealth as a good thing, but please note, this is only a relative good. Meaning, yes, it's good, but it's not the most important thing. So money is good, but it is only a relative good. So look at an example. I gave you lots of verses, but here's 11 verse 4. Wealth is worthless in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. Okay, so money is good, wealth is helpful, but notice it cannot help us with the most important thing. It cannot deliver us from judgment. Think ultimate judgment as we stand before God, our Creator. When we stand before God after our life, it's not going to so much matter how much money we made. Oh, but God, look at all the money I made. Yeah, well, were you righteous? God will say. Were you in right relationship with Him? And money will not do that for you. So money is not an ultimate good. It is simply a relative good. Still better to have it than not have it, the book of Proverbs will say. But look at the other thing this verse tells us, and this is our verse, verse 24, riches do not endure forever. Notice that points out that money is also temporary. Okay, money does not even last forever. So there's the obvious one, okay, it's not going to last into eternity, but even in this life, it doesn't last forever. So we cannot count on it in an ultimate sense. So consider here 23, 4-5. This verse says, do not wear yourself out to get rich. Do not trust your own cleverness. Cast but a glance at riches and they are gone, for they will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle. So Proverbs will say, yeah, well, money is good. It's a relative good, but it's only temporary. It's not forever. You can't count on it all the time. Now, beyond this, Proverbs will also warn us, like Jesus does, that wealth is also dangerous spiritually. So consider 28:11. The rich are wise in their own eyes. One who is poor and discerning sees how deluded they are. So we see clearly the only relative goodness of money there. There's a clear example where wealth can be dangerous. Okay, we can be tempted to trust in ourselves, figure we got everything figured out, think we don't need to trust and depend on God. But here, look, the wise poor person, the discerning poor person, is actually in a much better position. So perhaps the place of balance in this regard is best. And often the path of wisdom will be finding a path of balance in these extremes. So look on the screen here, 30 verse 7 to 9. 2 things I ask of you, Lord, do not refuse me before I die. Keep falsehood and lies far from me. And then look at this. Give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise I may have too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? There's that arrogance. Or I may become poor and steal and so dishonor the name of my God. Not a bad idea to aim for the balance between these things. Okay, so the first part of our passage says you better be attentive to your business and to your finances. The second part of our passage gives the reason why. Money's not forever. A crown doesn't last for all generations. This needs to be maintained, guarded, and watched over. Well, here we get the third key direction. Part 3, provision, a result of diligent processes. So what we see here is that we'll need to pay attention to wise processes to set up that will allow this resource of money and wealth to continue for us. Look at verse 25 and following. Again, this is the setting of ancient Israel. You are a shepherd. When the hay is removed and new growth appears, and the grass from the hills is gathered in, the lambs will provide you with clothing, and the goats with the price of a field. You'll have plenty of goat's milk to feed your family and to nourish your female servants. So notice the snapshot is there of a whole wise, well-functioning system of provision. Farmer grows the hay. You gather the hay to feed your animals when grazing is no longer available. And what comes of that? Well, from the lambs and from the goats, look, the lambs are going to give you clothing. And what do you do with lambs and sheep in the ancient world? Well, you shear them, you get the wool, and that gives you clothing. Notice the goats will buy the price of a field. You can sell some of your goats and get some money from that, and you can buy a field, probably for the grazing of more goats. So there you see reinvesting in the business. Then notice you'll have plenty of goat's milk to feed your family. Goat's milk was the favorite animal product in the ancient Middle East. So the dairy that you could use that goat's milk for was highly valued. Here was a key staple of life. Now, do you notice what's not said that you do with the sheep and the goats in this passage? What do we not do? Notice they're not being eaten. Okay, eating meat was very rare in the ancient world. So if you were a shepherd with sheep and goats, these animals are much more useful to you alive than in your belly, right? So you would only kill one of these animals and eat it on very rare, very special occasions. Because the sheep are there for their wool, the goats are primarily there for the milk. Though, of course, meat was eaten sometimes, but that was not the norm, okay? That was very special. So here we see a snapshot of this whole wise system that is set up. What does the wise person do? The wise person is cooperating with the natural order, working with the forces of nature, setting up this whole system. Okay, we get the hay, this feeds the animals, this supports them, they have more babies, we sell some to buy a field so we can hire more to feed more, and we got the milk to feed our... So notice this well thought out, carefully monitored system is functioning and is going to continue to provide provision for the family. And notice though, what do you have at the end? What's the final promise? Milk to feed your family. Notice it is not saying you get the 2025 Chevy Corvette from this process. Notice it's not saying the Malibu beach house from this process. Rather, the snapshot is here of provision, like you're going to have enough. In fact, in verse 27, that word plenty can also be translated simply as enough. So notice that's how the ESV translation puts it on the screen. Look, there will be enough goat's milk for your food, for the food of your household, and maintenance for your girls. So through attentiveness, through setting up and monitoring a wise process, you will have provision. You'll have enough. Again, I gave you more related verses, but just look at one here, 21 verse 5. This is the one I'm suggesting you memorize and meditate on this week if you want to do that. The plans of the diligent lead to profit, as surely as haste leads to poverty. If you're being hasty, you're not being attentive. You're not paying attention. And so that's going to get you in the end, that verse says. But what is going to lead to profit? What is going to lead to long-term success? Well, it is being diligent. It's paying attention. It's being disciplined. It's tending to this process that you are engaged with. Okay, well, let's start talking about our bottom line here for this passage. What's the bottom line from this odd little verse? Let's put it this way. I think this is fair to say if we interpret the image. Handle money God's way with wisdom. Handle money God's way with wisdom. 3 suggestions here. We'll spend a lot of time on the second one. First, by being attentive and diligent in your career. Remember those herds, that's not just the finances, that's also the source of income. So one of the things this verse is telling us is that we want to be attentive and careful and diligent in our career, whatever it is, or source of income. You'll maybe say, well, I don't have a career per se. That's fine. But you're involved in some aspects of life where you are seeking to be productive, to be of service to others, to be of service to your family. And so this verse is saying, look, we better pay close attention to this. We better not take for granted this opportunity that we have, whatever it is that we use for making money or being productive or serving others. To be successful, it's unlikely it's going to happen by accident. We need attentiveness and diligence. And all things being equal, those are going to be the best odds for success. Well, look at the second suggestion. We also need to be attentive and diligent in our finances. Because these herds, this is also our resources and our wealth. So we got to pay attention to this as well if we want to be successful in this part of life. Okay, well, look at the back of your outline. If you're on the phone, scroll on down there to the bottom. I've given you 2 appendixes. Now, this is drawing on some practical nuts and bolts wisdom from Dave Ramsey, who is a Christian, a financial teacher and guide for us. And I think what he says is best for most. Like, this is good go-to advice for most of us. So let's look here at Appendix 1, the attentiveness of keeping a budget. This verse told us pay close attention to your flocks, right? And if those flocks are representing in part money, this practical wisdom is telling us we need to pay close attention to the flow of our actual money. And the key and best way to do this is by keeping a budget. Well, what's a budget? It sounds boring. It's not boring. It's actually very fun and enjoyable once you figure it out. A budget is simply you telling your money where it's going to go instead of the money deciding where it's going to go. Have you experienced that? Have you noticed that money has a way of flying off where it wants to? Yeah, it does. If we're not attentive to where the money is going, it can end up in strange places that we never anticipated. So a budget is you deciding in advance where your money is going to go. So my suggestion is the easiest, best way to do this is to use this software that's actually also from Dave Ramsey. It's called Every Dollar. Okay, there's a website, everydollar.com, and there's a very helpful app that you can download on your phone called Every Dollar. And the beauty of this is it's way easier to use than a spreadsheet or pen and paper. So this is what you would do. You sign up for this, and it is free. Okay, there is a paid version that will connect with your bank accounts. You don't need that. I've been using the free version for 10 plus years. Never gave the poor guy $1. All right, so the free version is great. So here's what you want to do. You download this app, and the first thing is you list your income. And you deal with a budget like this for a month, okay? So you figure out, okay, how much money do I make in a month? Now, some of you, your income will fluctuate from month to month. That's fine, just estimate low, and then you have a plan with how you're gonna split up whatever extra comes in. So you come up with that number. Here's how much money I can expect that is gonna come in that I'm gonna have to use in the month of July, for example. Step 2, Ramsey says, give every dollar a name. Means you look at all these categories and you come up with whatever categories you need based on what you spend money on, and you decide, maybe it's a guess the first month, at how much money you're gonna spend on that. So maybe you're gonna say, all right, I think I'm gonna spend $600 on food. So you'd put a category of food, $600. And you go through and you peg all of whatever that number of income is, you put into different categories, so every dollar that's gonna come in that month, you've decided in advance what category it goes to. Now, I've given you a tip there. Notice, if you have spending categories that are gonna vary from month to month, don't leave it as a normal budget category, but in this software, there's an option to make it a fund. What that means is that fund will simply carry over to the next month, whatever the balance is. So if there's an expense in the month that's the same every month, don't do that, just use that as a normal category. So let's say you pay $60 a month for Paul Bunyan Internet. Okay, that's always $60 a month. So there's a normal budget category. Every month, oh, there it is, $60 goes there. Okay, but if you're putting $600 for food, some months you might not spend all of that, and you want to know that you now have an extra $100. So you make that a fund, so if you only have spent $500 on food this month, now when September starts, oh look, there's an extra $100 in there. So you can decide to let that build up, or you can reduce that by $100 and put that money elsewhere. So I'd say 75% of my categories, I make these funds, because I want to know what's carrying over to the next month. Okay, number 3, third step. Now notice so far you've only taken about 10 minutes to do this, maybe 15 minutes, so this is not hard. Though you might be doing a little guessing your first month. 3, then you track your spending by adding every purchase into the budget software. What? Every purchase? Greg, that sounds ridiculous. Does it though? We're told we're supposed to pay close attention to our flocks, okay? You need to know every I guarantee you that shepherd knows every time one of his sheep dies. So if you are gonna manage your flock well, you need to know where every dollar is actually going. Now this is actually pretty easy, it's not hard. Just make sure you get a receipt every time you make a purchase, stuff that receipt in your wallet or your purse, and then every couple of weeks, maybe even once a month, you sit down and you just enter every one of those receipts, whatever the amount was, in whatever category it was. Then crumple up the receipt and throw it away, okay? You can do it on your phone. I find it easier on the PC to sign into their website, but I'm a millennial, so these phones I'm skeptical of still. Okay, that's it. It's that simple. And from month to month, you adjust these categories. Now, the beauty of this is twofold. One, you are now free to do whatever you want with the money in those categories. A budget may sound constraining. It's really not. It's freeing. Because now you don't have to worry about it, okay? And you should make a category of like fun money, whatever you want to spend it on. All right, say you put $150 there in a month. You can spend that guilt-free. You want to go out and spend $150 on Nutella and ice cream? Go for it, okay? That's not wasteful. You decided that's money, you do whatever you want with. So as long as the number's in there, you go out and you spend guilt-free. You don't have to worry about the consequences because you've decided that was safe to spend on whatever you wanted. Also, if you know there's big things coming down the line, you start saving up for it. Is your car gonna last forever? No. So you can know for sure one day you're gonna have to buy a new car. Well, why don't you start setting aside a couple $100 a month now to start getting ready for that? So if you know something's coming, just a little bit at a time, you start saving up for it now, okay? So attentiveness of keeping a budget. This is an absolute key for being successful with finances. And it's fun, and it doesn't take that much time. If you want some help, we've got some people around church that would love to do this nerdy sort of thing and help you with it. Okay, so that's the attentiveness side. But we also need the diligent process side. So part 1 of our passage, we saw the need for attentiveness. Pay attention to the flock. Okay, that's going to be your budget. But in part 3, remember we saw that wise system that is set up. This provision is going to come from this system that is prudently and wisely set up. Well, let's talk about this in Appendix 2, again, with dependence on Dave Ramsey, the diligent process of the baby steps. So Ramsey, 20 plus years, has been talking about a simple, easy to get your head wrapped around approach to personal finances, which he calls the baby steps. And again, this is best for most, I think. This is helpful for most of us. And he has given you a roadmap here. Here is your wise plan. Here's the system you want to set up for long-term provision. He has 7 steps. Look at them here. Notice step 1, build up $1,000 cash in a beginning emergency fund. So the idea here is you can be guaranteed that something is going to go wrong. Something's going to break. You're going to have an unexpected purchase. And what we don't want to do is turn to our credit card, because whatever that cost is, we're going to end up paying back a lot more with interest. So absolute step 1 is you build up $1,000 cash, and that sits in an account and you don't touch it unless it's for emergency purposes. Oh, the starter broke on my van. I have to pay for that. That was $300. Okay, then you build that back up to $1,000 before you do anything. This is going to give you a tiny little margin between disaster. Okay, that's step 1. Step 2, use the debt snowball to pay off all your debt but a house. Now, Ramsey is great on this. He is very strong in his ability to motivate us to get out of debt. Most of us Americans, we are under a crushing load of debt. And Proverbs will warn us against this. I should have put some verses on it, but I didn't. Proverbs will talk about the borrower is slave to the lender. So the more and more debt that we take on, really now as we're paying them back, we're not working for ourselves anymore. Now we're working for that debt. And of course, once we pay it off, we have lost money because now we've spent more than we would have if we had paid cash. And this is especially true with credit cards. So Dave Ramsey says you have got to be radical and hardcore with this. And so what the debt snowball is, the only kind of debt he will accept is the mortgage of a house, because that is a good investment, all things being equal. That house tends to grow in value. You know what's not a good investment? Our cars. The moment we drive the car off the lot, depreciation hammers at it. So there's an example of bad debt. If we borrow to buy a car, that is a bad investment. A car is not an investment, it's an expense. So Ramsey's going to hammer us. He's going to say, you do everything you can to get out of whatever debt you're in, except for the house. And so his famous model is what he calls the debt snowball. Now, really, it would be most logical for us to look at our debts and figure out, okay, which one has the highest interest rate? And we would want to pay that off first. So that has good merit. However, he has another plan which has some psychological merit. He says you lay out all of your debts you owe, and first of all, you pay the minimum on all of them, of course, because you don't want to be getting more fees. And then he says, whatever of those things you owe the least amount of money on, now every month, as much as you can, you put extra payments on that. You are trying to defeat that smallest one. He says, now is when you have garage sales. You eat ramen and beans for 2 months. He uses the image of a cheetah. You've seen a gazelle trying to run from a cheetah, and that gazelle is just going crazy, jumping left and right. So he talks about that's what you want when you're getting out of debt. You need to recognize the threat this is to you, how it holds you down and keeps you from doing what you want, keeps you from serving God sometimes, keeps you from giving generously sometimes. So you need to develop a gazelle-like intensity to get away from this beast of debt. So he says this, now once you pay off that smallest debt you owe, now you take the monthly payment that you were paying on that one and you add that monthly payment to the next biggest debt. And you attack that one with extra. And so you get a little psychological boost because, look, I did it. I got rid of that one. And that gives you some motivation to attack the next one. So both of these approaches are valuable. Maybe you want to go after the highest interest one, or maybe you do his snowball one because it feels good. Either way, this is what you want to do. So step 2, you just sit there. You do nothing else till you've paid off all of these debts. Okay, so you have $1,000 emergency fund, and you get rid of all debt except a house if you owe one. Look at step 3. Now, your focus is to save up a fully funded emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses. Well, how do you know what your months of expenses are? Well, because you have a budget, you know what you need to live on every month, you multiply that by 3 or 6, and now your focus is to save up that amount of cash. Why? If you lose your job, if you have to buy 3 cars at once, okay, whatever has to happen, you want a nice emergency fund. So when there's an emergency, you don't have to go to the bank, you are the bank. You take a loan from yourself, and don't charge yourself interest. That would be mean. Don't do that. And what I'd suggest here is that's cash, but you want it to not just sit in a savings account because you'll lose to inflation. You can put this in some kind of liquid, high interest account, like Robinhood or Fidelity. They'll give you 4 or so % on uninvested cash. And you can get at it at any time. So you want your emergency fund to sit in something like that. So maybe you're keeping up with inflation, though probably not. Okay, then step 4, his suggestion is what you want to do, invest 15% of your household income into retirement. Okay, you don't want to work the rest of your life, so you want to start saving for retirement. Young people, the earlier you do this, you would not believe the advantages later in life because of the long-term interest. So he says, look, 15%. If your employer has some kind of matching retirement plan, the first thing you want to do is match that. So say they will match the first 6%. So that means you put 6% of your income into your company's retirement plan, and they'll give you the free match. So that's free money. Do that first. Then what you want to do is max out what is called a Roth IRA. It's an individual retirement account. A Roth IRA has some advantages over the traditional one, but you only do like $7,000 a year for this per person, you and a spouse if you're married. Maybe it's $7,500 this year, I don't recall. Okay, after that, then you move to a 401k or a traditional IRA if you like. Look at number 5 then. Start saving for kids' college if applicable. So if you got kids, you want to start putting away some money for this down the road. Look up a 529 plan. This is a particular type of savings plan to prepare for educational expenses. Step 6, pay off your house's mortgage early. So once you've done 1 through 5, now because your debts are gone, you've got extra money. Well, what are you going to do? Now you want to pay off that house early. You want to get rid of that mortgage payment. Boy, that'd be nice, right? That'd give you a lot more money every month. So that's step 6. Step 7 then, once your house is paid off, build wealth and give generously. Though Ramsey is sometimes misunderstood on this point, he's not saying that we wait until step 7 to start giving. He clarifies elsewhere, he wants us to be giving to charity, to people in need, to ministries all the way through because God commands this of us. So we're not just waiting till we get all of our ducks in a row to give to people in need because we may never get there, frankly, right? So this, again, all things being equal, this is best for most. This is a tried and true plan. This really works. It has worked for many, many thousands of people. And if you're interested in this, check out Dave Ramsey. He has an ability to motivate. He has a real gift for motivation. If you listen to him, he will help motivate you to do this. He's very good at this. I've given you some links to some videos you'll see there on the outline. On top, there's a video on how to set up a budget. Actually, there's 2 of them. One's his daughter on how to do it. Another one of him is just him yelling at you, calling you insults if you don't do this. So if you need that kind of motivation, watch that one. And then I've also given you a video there in Appendix 2, which is him explaining more and laying out more about these baby steps. Okay, our final, then, 3rd point below our bottom line, 3rd way to do this, to handle money God's way with wisdom, is to seek a balanced view of money, neither ignoring it nor worshiping it, always trusting God to provide. We want to aim for that middle road, not poverty, not riches. We acknowledge money is a limited relative good. Yep, we need it. We need to make use of it, yet we do not worship it. This is not our God, though it has the power to be that. Well, today we looked at this kind of odd, but surprisingly pertinent little verse from the ancient book of Proverbs. And yeah, we're not shepherds. Some of us have goats. Most of us don't. And yet the principles in this verse are eternally wise and helpful. So first we saw this need of being attentive. Pay close attention to your flocks, our business, and our finances. Why? Riches don't last forever. Yeah, wealth is a good, yes, but it is a limited good. It is a temporary good. And then third, we see this need for this diligent process that will lead to provision for us. Bottom line, handle money God's way with wisdom. And we've got some helpful Christian teachers out there like Dave Ramsey that can help give us some nuts and bolts advice for our day and our time. Well, Solomon realized he's been spending way too much money lately. And so here's a life hack that Solomon is thinking about. This is called the 30-day rule. And this idea is anytime you're about to make a big purchase, don't get it right away. Instead, write it down and only let yourself get it 30 days later. Well, what is that mandatory 30-day waiting period going to do? Well, if you're like me, 30 days later, you'd be like, what was I going to get? Oh, that was dumb. I don't need that. I don't want that anymore. So this is going to help preserve you from impulse buys of big ticket items. 30 days later, if you still want it and you have enough money saved up in your budget category for it, great, go for it. Why not? Well, thanks for coming today. If you've got anything going on in your life that you could use prayer for, we will have some members of our prayer team up here by the piano after the service, and they would love to meet with you and pray with you. Otherwise, go out into the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Repay no one evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the afflicted. Honor everyone. Love and serve the Lord, rejoicing in the power of the Holy Spirit. And may the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be among you and remain with you always. Amen.